This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so good morning. Parsha Shoftim is found on page 1024. Those who have the stone Chumash. And otherwise it's in Sefer Dvarim, Perek Tet Zayin, Pasuk Yud Chet. Okay? And Ora, we're getting some bounce back from you. So if you could just mute until you want to speak, we'd appreciate it. We want you to speak, but until then, thank you. Okay. Parshat Shoftim, let's begin. Shoftim v'shotrim. Shoftim, judges. Shotrim, officers. So you have the judges, and you also have the officers, those who enforce the judgment. Titain lecha. You shall give. You shall appoint lecha for you. B'chol sha'arecha. In all of the gates, Asher Hashem Elokecha notein lecha, that Hashem your God is giving to you, lishvatecha, to your tribes, v'shaftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek, and they shall judge the nation mishpat tzedek. Okay, so Kuyakar, other commentators point out, the word lecha seems to be extra over here. Shoftim v'shotrim titain or titnu. You need to appoint them b'chol sha'arecha, in all of your gates. Right? What is this lecha? What is this that you should appoint? Shoftim v'shotrim titain should be given lecha, for you. What is this seemingly extra word lecha perhaps coming to reveal to us, to teach us?
Yourself.
Yeah, but why do I need it, Ruthie?
I need to judge myself and to just look at my deeds and make
Good,
that
good,
I'm doing good.
good. Okay, so good. Let me double back to that in a moment, Ruthie. Good. So, on one level, we're simply talking about the appointing of the judges. Every society needs to have proper judges and proper enforcement of those judgments. If you don't have proper judging, then there is no sense of confidence in the whole system, and then everything falls apart. If you've got laws but they're not being enforced, you got judges, they're not being enforced, without getting political, right? So that runs into serious problems for the smooth running of a society. Good. The lecha, so some point out that lecha, they have to be judges over you. Meaning, who normally appoints the judges? The people who are in power. So you're always running the risk of them appointing judges who will be, as expression goes, in their back pocket, right? I gave you your job, right? I could take away your job over here. And therefore, it's saying titain lecha, in order to have a proper society, then they need to be the judge and the officers even over you. Who's you? You, the one who appointed them. And then v'shaftu es ha'am mishpat tzedek. Then you could be sure that there will be justice for the Am, for the general populace. But when they will be bowing to the powers that be, then forget about any justice. Not just will there not be justice for those in power, there will not be justice at all. Because from the start, everything is going to be all twisted and all tilted. There's a beautiful story. I forget the name of the Rav who it was, but a young Rav was appointed as the Rav of Hamburg, which was a very, very large, illustrious city with many very powerful, wealthy, powerful people who were running that community. On the first day of his installation, a woman comes, knocks on the door. Poor woman, a widow. And she had a complaint against the most powerful person of the city. And he said to her, excuse me, can it wait until tomorrow? I just landed here. I need to get a little bit settled. And she impressed upon him that no, it can't wait. So he calls his attendant and says, please go summon Mr. So-and-so, Mr. Plony, to come for a discussion, for a din. And the attendant says, this is not a person who normally gets summoned, not on last minute notice. Probably this is not such a good idea. And he says, you must go and summon. He goes there, and this wealthy person says, excuse me, this first day rabbi is summoning me. Tell them that I'll come when I have some time. But I have a very, very busy schedule for the foreseeable future. The person goes back, the attendant goes back, tells this first day rabbi the response. He tells the attendant, go tell him if he doesn't come today, I'm putting him in cherem. Cherem is excommunication. He'll be excommunicated. This poor attendant started to tremble and said, maybe you could send someone else to tell him that. Said, no, you must go tell them that. The guy goes, knocks on the door, gives the message, and then starts to run for his life. Well, this wealthy person and the other wealthy community leaders come to the rabbi's house that day. And they say to him, young man, congratulations. You have passed the test. You can be the rabbi of our community. But we needed to make sure, we were concerned, such a young person, we were concerned, would you have the fortitude to do what needs to be done as a Rav and not to be bowing down to the powers that be. So Shoftim v'Shotrim titain lecha. You, the ones who are appointing the judges and the officers, they must be Shoftim v'Shotrim titain lecha. They must be the judges and the officers for you. They must be over you. You must be under their jurisdiction. And if that's the case, then we know v'shaftu et ha'am mishpat tzedek. Then they will judge the nation in a mishpat tzedek. So that's one approach to this word lecha. I'm always, it's this past Shabbos we had a Bar Mitzvah boy, and he lay in the very beginning of the Parsha. So when I spoke on Shabbos, I took the first 4 words and I showed how each one of those words, Re'eh, Anochi, Notain, Lifnechem, I showed how each of those words is is packed with teachings, with understandings, each and every one of those words. And afterwards I was approached. No, the problem was there was Lefneichen. That was the Vort. Right. That was the Vort, exactly. And afterwards I was approached by a person who was there who was not Jewish, but he told me that he does a lot of reading of the Old Testament, as he calls it, and he said that he was very moved by how he sees how every word contains. So here we have the word lecha, a two-letter word, right? And that's what it teaches us. But on another level, it also points out what Ruthie had said. Titein lecha. Besides this general idea of needing to be Shoftim v'Shotrim that will be over the community, Titein lecha. We each need to be our own Shofet and our own Shoter. We need to be our own judge who's constantly judging what should I do, what shouldn't I do? How did I do in that situation? Did I fall short of what I should have done? What do I need to do now in order to make amends, in order to correct that? We need to be our own shofet. We also need to be our own shoter, our own enforcer, right? There are times that we need to, okay, if I have an Entenmann's donut, I have to do 30 push-ups, whatever it might be, right? To enforce, to give ourselves parameters, and when we break those parameters, to give ourselves repercussions. B'chol sha'arecha, in all of your gates. And the Shlach HaKodesh says, we each have our own gates. What are our gates? We have 7 gates, he says. We have our eyes. We have our ears. We have our mouth. We have our nostrils, right? We have these different gates that takes in all of this of the world around us. And then we have the intake and we have the outflow. And how careful do we need to be when it comes to these gates to judge what goes in, not just what goes in, but how will we judge that which goes in? Meaning we see something and we could see it in a certain way, in a positive way. We could see it in a negative way. We need to be the judges over ourselves and to make sure that we are judging, we are enforcing, that we are being very, very judicious in terms of what comes in and in terms of what goes out. There is a Mishnah in Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Fathers, that says, Al tihi rasha bifnei atzmecha. Don't be a rasha before yourself. How would you understand that? What does that mean? Don't be a rasha bifnei atzmecha. Don't be an evil person in front of yourself. What would you say? What is the Mishnah teaching us there? What is it instructing us? Ora.
Don't be harsh with yourself.
Okay.
I don't know if that is the interpretation, but I want to say something about be your judge and enforcer. I think that at least in my life, the way I do it, it's like coming from the other end. I'm saying, how do I want to show up in the world? And so if then with that determination, I choose to do things more right than wrong. And so it's without the judging. It looks like what we are learning here is that if we go about our day and we didn't do things right, then we need to atone or correct. So the way I see it is you choose your way according to the law and your view of life according to what we believe in, and then you're doing it right.
Yeah, yes, 100%. I did not mean to accentuate the mistakes and correcting it. Yes, right. To be judicious, I think the term I used before, right? In the way that we act, and yes, and to carefully think about our actions, weigh them, and make sure that we do things right. And in case the inevitable situations where we don't, then to make amends. But certainly the first step is to be judicious and to make good decisions, right? And to make sure that we're acting in a way that represents who we are and what we should be, and as you said also, Ora, right, how we want others to view us. And one of the things about, I had a funeral last week, and one of the ideas that I often like to present at a funeral is that it's so important to go to a funeral, and that way we recognize the value and the gift that every day that we have is, and also it gives us time to ponder a little bit, what will be said about us, and what can we do that which will be said about us will be something that we like we just heard perhaps at that funeral, that's how they should speak about us also. So yes, certainly to be judicious. And to come back to the Altihi Rosh what you said, yes, Ora. So one level of that certainly is that we can't beat ourselves up, right? If I view myself as a Rasha, then right, as an evil person, then that becomes almost like a self-fulfilling dictate. We say this in education, right? We famously, when Yaakov was giving his blessings to the tribes before his death, and he was going to rebuke harshly Shimon and Levi, he said, Arur apam, cursed is their anger, right? So it's not that, it's not that you are bad, but this behavior is unacceptable, right? But if I'm bad, then I'm bad. So I will act in such a way. One of my mentors, Zichron Livracha, Rabbi Yehuda Mandelkorn, who was the Rosh Yeshiva, the yeshiva that I was teaching at. So at times we had to ask a boy to leave, but he was so against using the term, we've got to throw him out. You don't throw a person out. Garbage gets thrown out. We're not going to kick him out. We don't kick a person on the way out. He's not going to be thrown out. He's not going to be kicked out. He might have to be asked to leave. And when he would ask someone to leave, and the person didn't have a place to sleep, the boy would then be invited to his house to stay at his house until he was able to find another place to go. Right? So it's not the person. It's Alti Rasha B'fnei Atzmecha. Don't view yourself as a Rasha. There's a beautiful, I told the story recently, I think, this class, another class, about Rabbi Twersky, Zatzal, when he was a young boy, and his father was also a Hasidic Rebbe, right? Had a rabbi over, right? Not a Hasidic rabbi, another rabbi over for Rosh Hashanah. And the rabbi and little Avram Twersky of Ramallah played chess. And the father thought that Rosh Hashanah is not a time to be playing chess. So he calls him into the office, into his study, to speak to his son. And he basically said to him a beautiful Yiddish expression, pas nicht. Pas nicht means it's beneath you. Pas nicht, it doesn't pass. It's not befitting, is the best way to put it. It's not befitting, right? Which means you're above that. So as I'm giving a rebuke, I'm lifting you up, right? Your behavior is beneath you. So he spoke to them, and then as he was leaving, right, he asked his son, did you win? And his son said, yes, twice. Right? So that's the idea, that when you need to give rebuke, you lift the person up, and that behavior is beneath you. That's really the idea of Yom Kippur, that we become like angels. We're wearing white, and we're not eating, we're not drinking, right? And then we sort of have this different vantage point, this different perspective, looking back on our actions and saying, oh, that's not reflective of me. Right? What was I thinking? I'm above that. Right? So, Alti Rasha bifnei atzmecha. That's one level. But another level goes back to what we just said before with the Shla Kodesh and Ruthie's idea of Titain Lecha. Right? Other people might have this view of you. Oh, this person, he's so good, she's so amazing, right? But we know ourselves. We know our shortcomings. We know ourselves. And therefore, don't be swayed by what everyone else might be saying or thinking about you, but you've got to know yourself, and you know your shortcomings, and work on those and improve those. Right? Whatever other people are saying, put that aside. How about what you know about yourself, right? And make sure that you look at yourself and you're able to say, okay, I'm doing a good job. I'm working on it. I have my faults as everyone does, but I am working on them, and I am trying to improve. There's a great story about Rav Shmelka from Nicholsburg. Great story, that he came to speak, and he was a very, very well-known and prominent speaker, and he came to speak. And before he would go out to speak, he asked for a private room that he could have a few minutes to gather his thoughts. So he was granted a room, and some people were curious to hear, what might they overhear him? Right? He seemed to be talking in the room. What might he be saying? So they put their ears to the door, and they hear him saying, "Oh, Rav Shmuel, so good to have you here. Oh, excellent. Oh, beautiful drush. Oh, so inspiring. Oh, thank you so much. It's such an honor that you're here." Right? And it seemed very, very strange. Right? Very, very strange. So afterwards, they somewhat abashedly let him know they happen to have overheard. They didn't say we put our ears to the door. They happened to have overheard what he was saying, and it seemed very strange. And he explained that the mission of us says that the honor of your friend should be before you, like your own honor. Okay? So the simple meaning is the same way that you're concerned about your own honor, so too, so too should you be sure to honor other people also. That's the simple meaning. He had a different twist on it. He said, your own honor, the honor of your friend should be as dear to you as your own honor. And he said as follows, my own honor, when I honor myself, it sounds so silly. It sounds so empty. When I say, oh, Rabbi Ciner, you spoke so nicely. Oh, Rabbi Ciner, that was great. Oh, Rabbi Ciner, so inspiring. When I say it to myself, it sounds ridiculous. That's how it should sound when other people say it to you. The honor of others should be to you like your own honor. So what he was doing was preparing himself that when people would say that, it would not go to his head. It would sound as silly as when he says it to himself, right? So alti rashiv le'atzmecha, right? No matter what other people say, right? We know ourselves. We know our pluses. We know our minuses, and we have to make sure that we are shoftim v'shotrim titain lecha. That we need to make appoint our own. We need to be the judges over ourselves. To like Ora said, of course, make the right decisions, to judge things properly, what comes in, what comes out, make the right decisions. And when we don't make the right decision, to be that shoter, to push ourselves to do what needs to be done to correct and to enforce. Yes, Jenny.
Rabbi, just to add to that, talking about judging, that we judge each other all the time. And so in the process of judging each other, I think part of it is to judge ourselves and why we have that opinion. Because often when you judge somebody, it's from your own personal bias or something within yourself. And I think if one can judge, when it often happens when you look at somebody, sometimes we automatically judge something or somebody because of our own biases. So I think it's kind of useful under those circumstances to see what is in us that makes us look at somebody with that kind of bias.
Beautiful idea, Jenny. Yeah, right. If we're perceiving something a certain way, is that really what it is, or is it our own bias that is making us, giving us perhaps a jaundiced view of who or what we're looking at? Yeah. To be self-reflective in that respect. Beautiful.
Rabbi, I lost the picture, but I want to add to Jenny's, as Chazal, our sages said, "Aposel bemumo posel." That's exactly it.
Yeah. That right. There is a concept in psychology known as projection. Projection is that you project your own faults onto someone else. That is a relatively new psychological concept, except that the sages said it about 2,000 years ago, right? In the Gemara, right? Kol aposel bemumo posel. All who disqualify someone else, it's with their own blemish that they disqualify the other person, which basically psychology later on came around to calling that projection. Yeah. Okay, let's jump up ahead to page 1032 in our Chumashim. And yes, 1 second.
To what Aura was,
Are you in?
yes.
Yeah.
To what Aura just shared, or the
Yeah.
quote from the Gemara, actually, I just noticed that the verses afterwards talk about a blemish sacrifice. And so it's kind of interesting that those would be alongside talking about judging. And if you connect it to that Gemara, so, you disqualify, disqualify someone for their blemish, which is a blemish you have yourself. So just
Nice. Very nice, Gabrielle. Beautiful. You see, when you come in person, see what happens? Okay. Okay. Let's jump up ahead to 10:32. And we're taught, okay, I'm sorry, and that's Perek Yudchet Pasuk Tet, chapter 18, verse 9. When you came to the land that Hashem has given luck to you, don't learn to do like the abominations of those nations there, right? They would be Mavre Beno Bito Be'esh. They would send their children through fire as a type of service. They would be in Koseng Samim, Monim, and Achesh Mechashev, Chover Chavar, Shoel Ovidoni, Dereshol Ameitim, and all these ways of trying, contacting the dead and all these, hoojie woojie sort of stuff to try to figure out what one should do and understand the world. Ki tovat Hashem, kol osei eila. This is it's disgusted by Hashem, all those who do this. And that is why they are being sent out from this land before you. Pasuk Yud Gimel 13, Tamim Tihiyeh Im Hashem Elokecha. You should be Tamim, right? You should be wholesome. How do they define this? Wholehearted with Hashem, your God. Tamim, right? Interesting. Also, a mum, if something is blemished, if it does not have a mum, it's called tamim, complete, full. Yeah. Yes. But it means complete. Rashi says, Hitalech imo b'tmimut. Go with him with this tmimut, with this almost like simplicity, with this purity. Utitzapelo, and wait for Hashem. Below tachkor achara atidot. Don't go delving into, I have to know the future. Elakol mashiyavo alecha kabel bit tmimut. All that comes your way, kabel, accept it, bitmimut, with a simple, wholehearted acceptance. Va'az tiyeh imo ulechelko. Then you will be with him, ulechelko. Then you will be his part, his portion. And this is something that we discuss often. Right? That we're not going to understand everything that comes our way. There's a great pasuk, we had it in our morning class, the Gemara class, which is Shomer Pitayim Hashem, which means simply God guards, Shomer, he guards, Pitayim, the foolish ones. And there's so many times that something doesn't go the way that I had hoped it would go. And then I say, and then something else happens. I realize, thank God, it didn't go the way that I wanted it to go. And I say, Shomer Pitayim Hashem. Thank you, Hashem, for guarding the foolish. Just this past Shabbos, I'm going to, Natalie leads a group to Israel every year on her Momentum BGI 20C, and I lead a men's group every few years. And the dates for this year's trip comes out right after Simchas Torah, and it's be a little bit hard, right? And then I saw they're having another trip about a week or two after that, which would have been a lot better. So I called up and said, can I move my trip to that trip? Sure, no problem. I send an email to the guys who have already signed up. Guys, it's okay with you, right? No one's booked tickets yet. We're going to go these dates instead of those dates. One of the guys writes back to me and says, Rabbi, I can't. He's a doctor. I'm going to be presenting at a conference. I won't be able to be there during those days. So I said, okay, what can I do? I says, okay, so we'll keep the original dates. We'll keep the original dates. All right, too bad, right? This past Shabbos, I'm talking to someone here in Shul, and they have a Bar Mitzvah coming up of their son. I said, remind me the dates of the Bar Mitzvah. And had I changed it, I would not have been there for the Bar Mitzvah, which would have been a real major mess up, right, on my part, and it would have bothered the family very much. And I said the words, Shomer Ketayim Hashem. Hashem guards the foolish, right? I so much wanted to change the dates, and it would have been terrible, right? So when it doesn't go our way, and we can look back afterwards and say, oh, it's a good thing it didn't go our way, that's easy. But that is meant to teach us the attitude that we need to have real time, even before we find out why it's good for us, or even if we'll never find out in this world why it's good for us. But to have that confidence, just like then, I was so disappointed, and it was such a blessing. We're in good hands. And Tamim Tihiyeh im Hashem Elokecha. Be wholehearted with Hashem, your God. Page 1032. You don't need to go looking for the future and understand, right? Recognize, accept that we are in good hands. I heard a beautiful shot from Rav Yaakov Weinberg Zatzal, my Rosh Yeshiva, and was my Natalie and I. He was our Masada Kedushin. Back in Bereshit, when Yaakov is finishing up his stint in the house of Lavan, and he's been shepherding for 14 years to marry first Leah and then Rachel, and then 6 years working, and whatever arrangement was made of what would be his payment, Lavan kept switching it, whichever, right, 100 times the sages say he switched it. And then Hashem comes to him in a dream and says, Yaakov, time to go home. So Yaakov wakes up, calls out Rachel and Leah to the field, speaks to them, and says to them all that had happened and the dream. Their response was very strange. Their response was, our father has sold us. He hasn't treated us like daughters. He sold us. He made you work 14 years in order to have our hands in marriage. And then he's been tricking us ever since. And Hashem told you to go. So we should go. Very strange. The first thing should have been, Hashem told us to go, so we go. That should have been the first thing, and that should have even been the only thing. Forget about everything else. Hashem told us to go, we go. Why was there that whole build-up? He sold us, hasn't treated us like daughters, he's been tricking us, and Hashem told us to go. So Rav Weinberg Zatzal said along the lines we just said a moment ago, they were training themselves. Hashem told us to go, so of course we're going to go. But in this situation, we see clearly how that's the only thing to do. That's the right thing to do. There's no other way of looking at it. So by spelling that out, when they would have a situation where Hashem tells them to do something, or an event happens that's not according to their liking, that's not what they had hoped for, but they'd be able to use that as the foundation to give them the strength to say, whatever Hashem tells us to do, whatever we're supposed to do, that is what we will do, and to accept that. This comes up again a little later in the Parsha, on page 1032. 8, which is Perek Yud Tet, Pasuk Yud Tet, 1919. This is where the Torah tells us about what's called Eidim Zomimim. Eidim Zomimim are witnesses. We'll call them conspiring witnesses. And there's a din here, there's a law here, a fascinating law of the Torah, which really gives strength to the whole system of testimony. And that is, if witnesses testified, we saw this loan take place, we saw this murder take place, and other witnesses come along and say, a second, you guys cannot have witnessed that in Irvine, Tuesday, August 30th at 9:50. You were with us in Los Angeles at the time. So they're not simply contradicting the testimony, they are removing the witnesses from the scene. Vasitem lo kasher zamam lasot lachiv. What is the law? Pasuk Yud Tet, will do to them that which they conspired to do to the other person. They tried to make that person owe $1,000, they pay $1,000. They tried to give that person capital punishment, they will get capital punishment. And that is this incredible safeguard that goes into every testimony that's going to be given, right? Because if they say to me, oh, yeah, see exactly when did it happen? I'm not sure exactly when it happened, right? They toss me out. Why? Because I'm trying to cover my own back over there. If I'm not sure when it happened, I can't be found to be an aid zomain. They can't say, at that time, you were with us elsewhere. Oh, so it wasn't Tuesday, it was Wednesday. Right? I was not sure when it was. No. The testimony, in order for my testimony to be testimony, I must lock myself down to an exact time and place. And that way I'm putting my neck on the line over here. That's the din over here. Beautiful. But there's a very, very strange aspect to it. The Gemara says, Kasher zamam la'asot, that which he conspired to do. And the Gemara says, Kasher zaman below kasher asa. What he conspired and not that which he did. Meaning what? Let's say my testimony went through and this person was executed. And then witnesses come and say, Ciner, you with us in Los Angeles at the time. How could you have possibly witnessed that supposed murder that took place? But the guy has been killed already, then I won't get killed. And the Gemara says, what do you mean? It's a kal v'chomer, isn't it? If when I try to get someone killed, I'll get killed for that. When I succeeded in getting someone killed, of course, I should be deserving of the death penalty for that. Esther, you want to say something? Looks like you're on the verge of saying something. No? Right? Yes. So that's the din. That's the law, but the Gemara is puzzled by it. Right? The Gemara says, yeah, but the pasuk, that's the law. Kasher zama below kasher asa. Why? How do we understand that? So I'll share with you two approaches. One approach is something that we've discussed before. The Torah does not give punishments. The Beit Din does not give punishments. What the Torah elucidates is a means of atonement. And there are times that a person can do something that's so horrific that going on through life, the usual, I'll give tzedakah, I'll make my brachos, I'll daven, the usual, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, that's not going to work anymore. What the person has done is so egregious that the person has to be willing to give up their life. And the capital punishment is the person is literally saying vidui, the person makes kiddush. It's a whole incredible tshuva process to cleanse the person on their way to the next stage of life, and that's how they're cleansed. So there are no punishments. There are means of atonement, of lifting oneself up and out of whatever mess they might have gotten themselves into. And that's why we have a halacha of ein onshin min hadin, which means we can't use a kal v'chomer to determine someone's punishment. We can't say, if this guy who did a level 5 infraction got this punishment, the guy who did a level 7 infraction, of course will get this punishment. No, we can't say that. Why? Because it could be for a level 5 infraction, this will serve as an atonement. But for a level 7, this will not serve as an atonement. Therefore, we don't give it. So there are those that explain, if this person went through with it, didn't just give a testimony, but actually led a person to their death, the Beit Din says to them, I'm so sorry. I don't have the tools in my toolbox to help you. The Beit Din is not there to punish, it's not there to kill, to execute. It's there to bring atonement. What you've done is so beyond. Sorry, we don't have the tools for you. What will happen? Hashem have to take care of it. Hashem will need to find a way for your atonement. But we don't have, we're not authorized. Normally we're authorized as agents following the dictates of the Torah to give a certain atonement. Over here we can't. That's how some explain this. But the Ramban has a different approach, which comes back to what we said before of Tamim Tiyeh Hashem Elokecha. You should be pure and wholehearted with Hashem. He explains as follows. We conspired, myself and other witnesses, we conspired to get this guy killed. Before anything happens to him, we're found to be Zomerman. We're found to be Adam Zomerman. What happens? We'll get killed. Since we're found to be Zomerman, he will not get killed, which means he was not deserving of death. So what were we trying to do? We were trying to bring death upon a person who was not deserving of death. For that, we will get the capital punishment. We'll do to them kasher zama they conspired to do. But if that person actually was put to death, what does that mean? That means for whatever reason, min hashamayim, from the heavens, that person was supposed to go. So we weren't trying to bring death to an innocent person. We were trying to bring death to a person that truly was deserving of death. Now, we will still be held accountable. We don't know what the din shamayim is. We don't know what the judgment of heaven. We couldn't have known that person was truly deserving of death. So we will be held responsible for our intent. But ultimately, that person was deserving of it. And therefore, for that, we do not deserve this death penalty, which is astounding, which meant our testimony was false. We weren't there. But if that person was put to death, even though it was based on our false testimony, if that person was put to death, what does that mean? Their time had come. That was what was supposed to happen. In such a way, tamim tiyeh, right? When things happen, we think we understand, we think we know what's going on. Tamim tiyeh im Hashem Elokech, right? You've got to be pure and wholehearted with Hashem your God, and Hashem Elokecha. Yes, Gabriel.
So when we were studying for Tisha and my husband and I were reading through the Book of Our Heritage. It was explaining Medrash, or maybe it's just it's in the Tanakh, but it was explaining how Nebuchadnezzar, how he didn't want to carry out the destruction of the temple because he knew the punishment. He's like, no, I don't want to be the agent, but it had to happen. But he didn't want to be the agent through which it happened. So it kind of reminded me of what you're explaining, that the judgment will be carried out, and do you want to be the person through who it's carried out by?
Right. Beautiful, excellent. Right, and yes, Ora.
What do you say about someone who decides to kill somebody, to murder? So he was Zomem, he had the intention to cause this death. He goes out, he shoots him, and the guy dies. So why punish the murderer now?
Yes, Rabban asked that question. The Rabban actually is talking about this when it says about the Egyptians, V'gam et ha'am asher ya'avodu dan anochi. And also the nation that you served, I will judge them. And Rabban asked, but it was already decreed that we would be there in Egypt, right? So why hold the Egyptians responsible for it? So he differentiates as follows. Either way, yes, what you're saying is correct. If the person died, their time had come. Now, and he argues with the Rambam on an aspect over here. The Rambam says, the Maimonides said, well, who said that this Egyptian needed to do it? Right? There was a decree on Egypt at large, but each individual Egyptian, he'll be held responsible. Ramban says no. On the contrary, if there was a decree on Egypt at large, the one who would do it would be the one who's fulfilling the will of God. He should be rewarded. He says the issue there was that they overdid it, that they went that much further. They did that much more. And that's why they would be held accountable. Actually, they connect. Oh, good. Yeah, that's connected to the staff and the snake without going into that. So Ramban says, so why would then the Egyptians have, but he says, and he quotes the Nebuchadnezzar, right? There where he had a decree that you will be the one to do it, so then that's what he needs to do. But in a case, right, so even though he then asks what Ora is saying, so then in a case where I shoot somebody, if the guy died, guess what? I'm doing the will of God, right? All these mass murderers, all these serial killers, they're holy men, holy women. Mostly men are serial killers, I think. Always men, yeah. What can I say? Yeah, right? They're holy men. They're doing the chas v'shalom, heaven forbid. But rather what? They will be held accountable because they did not know. They did not know. And they were not told by God. And some are crazy. They hear these voices, think that God's telling them they're really not well people, not to exonerate them. But they did not hear from God. And therefore, they went and literally killed someone, right, who was without a person who was not deserving of death in their mind, right? But we have to differentiate, as you're saying, or between when they did it themselves and when they gave testimony to set into motion a whole series of events, right? There they will be held responsible. We can't say that if I hurt somebody, right? Oh, they were meant to be hurt, and therefore I don't have to worry about that. But if someone does hurt me, so there ideally I recognize that I was supposed to go through that pain for whatever reason, that they chose to be the one to inflict that pain, that's between them and God. but not between me and them. And I can, the Chavetz Chaim says that if a person humiliates you publicly, right, and it's terrible, right? He says you should view it as if you had some tar on your back, and a guy came with a hard bristle brush and scraped it off. It hurts, but you're clean afterwards. And that humiliation that you went through helps to cleanse you of things that you might have done wrong in the past, right? So when it comes to ourselves, ideally, tamim ti Hashem elokecha, we could be, except I need to have that tsar, fair enough. That person, like Yaakov said to his brothers, right? Hashem sent me here, not you. If I'm here, I was meant to be here. The fact that you guys chose to sell me down here, that's between you and God. You'll have to work that out. But that's not between you and me. I deal with Hashem. Tamim tihiyeh. We need to be wholehearted and accepting in Hashem Elokecha, with Hashem your God. Okay, so we need to judge ourselves well, properly, and also to have a good judgment, Shoftim, when it comes to Hashem, and to be tamim, to be that wholehearted and that honest with integrity and that accepting when it comes to Hashem. Okay, my friends, we'll call it over here. You're very welcome. Thanks for joining in. Everybody can say goodbye to one another.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov. Bye-bye.
Lunch and Learn on Thursday is about the Jewish view on angels. Interesting. That's Thursday, 12:30.